Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Take Your Points. This week my guest is Cahal Carvill, Gaelic Life columnist, and among other things we're going to talk about injuries, the Super 8s and the coverage of hurling on TV of the past weekend. So Cahal, you've obviously got a moon boot on you. We didn't really speak about it last time, a fortnight ago. You want to give us a bit of input into the moon boot and also your column into discovering your career may be over?
Well, I wouldn't go that far now, Ronan, but certainly when I looked at this season at the start of the year, it wasn't something I'd factored into it. I have had injuries in the past, broken fingers and thumbs and things associated with, I suppose, playing hurling and football, but none that were one, career-threatening, or two, that impacted my ability to play during the season. This one's been slightly different, a pretty innocuous challenge. I went to shoot, turning onto my right foot, which would be the favoured foot anyway, and the foot stayed in the ground, and whatever way my body turned, I heard a pop, and I thought someone had maybe stood on my heel or something had happened, and when I turned around I was on the ground and my foot was vibrating, and I knew instantly with the pain that it wasn't good. I had heard people who had done Achilles injuries before and had been watching the AFL where one of the guys had ruptured his Achilles, and he had looked back as if someone had tackled him from behind, but whatever way his foot had gone. So it's diagnosed as a ruptured Achilles. The length of me being out from coming back to play competitively is 9 to 12 months, which has obviously ended my season. At the time, I thought I would be fine, and yes, it was sore, but I thought I'll go to the doctors here and they tell me, I've done ligaments or something like that. But when I got the prognosis that it was season ending and potentially career ending, it was a pretty dark day for me. I had gone across to the hospital on my own thinking it would have been fine, and then when I got the news, it was like a hammer blow. And that's why in my column in the Gaelic Life last week, I wanted to sort of bring that to the fore for other people who have suffered the same injury, and also how they have dealt with it and how to deal with it going forward. Because, as I said in my column, the GAA has been my life since I was able to walk, and being told I can't play a championship this year, even though I think in my mind I should still be able to do it, but with this type of injury, it's really the mental side of things that I've sort of struggled a wee bit with, by trying to stay positive and support my teammates and making sure they're ready for a championship. But unfortunately I can't be on the field with them to help.
One of the hardest things is being on your own and not having anybody around you, because you've just got to spend time rehabbing. Like, yeah. You'll be able to come back and still play though, but you're worried about not playing at the highest level again?
The initial worry is not being able to play again because of the strain, and the way I suppose my game is, there's a lot of quick turns and movement like that, and being at a lower centre of gravity, you rely on your strength of your Achilles and your hamstrings, etc. And the doctor, when they had looked at it and they did an ultrasound on it, when I was sitting there, it was quite funny because the only other people in the ultrasound unit were people coming in for pregnancy checkups. So I was sitting there with your leg in a cast at the time, and being unable to move your foot and having to keep your foot, the key thing for an Achilles injury, which I've learned, is to keep your foot like a ballerina, pressed down like that there. So not only do I have the boot, but I have a incline on the boot to make sure my leg stays like that. So the recovering the injury is going to take a long time, but then recovering the strength in your muscles not being used. For an example, the nurse the last time I was at the hospital said that there's been a 40% decrease in muscle mass in my calf as a result of not using it. So it's like any muscle, even your brain, you don't use it, you lose it. And the big problem, and what's going to take the time for me to recover, is to actually build up muscle mass again. So I'm fit to actually use both legs, and obviously the right leg has been overcompensating, so it's getting back to using that. And even now on the crutches, when I'm putting a small amount of weight on the boot, it has been difficult even to get around.
What advice have people given to you in order to deal with the mental side? You said this is the hardest part. What sort of advice have you got?
Yeah, well, when I did go to the doctors, and before, I suppose one of the changes when you're not playing at an inter-county level, in terms of even the medical side of things, previously when I broke my elbow playing, I was the next day, you're in Knightbridge under the insurance with the county, and I was seen by a specialist straight away, and he could diagnose the problem and what the best recovery was. But when obviously having retired from the county with the club, the next stage was just NHS, and in fairness, the doctors and the nurses in the Royal have been fantastic, and it's been great advice. But they will be dealing with, I suppose, the normal people who have had these type of injuries, and maybe not the sports people as much. So the mental side of things for me is, I've spoken to a few people who have had these injuries, and it's trying to stay positive, trying to be there for your teammates as they prepare for championship. And I went back to work after the day, because sitting at the house, you need to keep your mind active, and being on your own and things like that there make it even more difficult. But when I went back to work, even though I was in the crutches and shorts on for a few days, which isn't maybe great in a law firm, but everyone understood and were really supportive of me, not only in work, but also if there's anything I needed in terms of travelling and to client meetings and things like that. So, plus it's a good icebreaker as well. But mentally staying positive that I will be back, and I just need to go through the process, trust the medical advisors, trust the physios, put in the hard work on my own when I need to, and come February, March next year, hopefully I'll be back on the field. I'm given on getting married next year. I'm under strict orders to make sure I'm back walking by then. So that's an incentive in itself to get back. But after the initial disappointment, now it's right, what do I need to do to make sure I'm back on that field next year?
Great athletes are mentally strong enough to come back from big injuries. I watched the Dawn Wall, the climbing movie about Tommy Caldwell, who went through a whole lot of things in his life, but one of them was losing his index finger, and he's a world-class climber, and they told him, like, you need to find a new career, but he decided against that and stayed being a mountain climber and ended doing El Cap, the climb of it. And it just says to me, like, it takes a serious mental strength, and you have to be mentally strong to beat those challenges,
Yeah, well, I think, and that's one of the great things for sport in general, and one of the points I touched on in the column was that life is crap at times, and you just have to hang in there, and that's a lesson in itself, not only in terms of sporting injuries, but in your life you'll have setbacks. And for young people playing sport and having to deal with that adversity and learning from it, sport is a great teacher for that. And obviously for me it's slightly different in that this has come towards the autumn of my career, so I'm not expecting that I'm going to play for another 10 years. The reality of it has sort of brought it home a wee bit to me, and that's maybe in my mind that's more impactful than if I did this when I was 19 or 20, then I would definitely have been pushing to come back. But certainly I think I've still got a lot to give to the club, and I want to be back and to be in the best shape I can be, to contribute to a championship run hopefully next season. This season's over for me, but I'm there to support the boys to make sure that they do the business when it comes to the end of the month.
If we think about the weekend, there's a number of teams who had to come up against adversity, and some won, some lost, and one of them was Laois and Tipperary in the hurling. Laois had come out of the Joe Mc Donagh, and we spoke about it last time out, that how they should get good coverage, because this was a team that deserved to get it, but they didn't. In the end, they didn't really get enough TV time. What do you think of that? Were you disappointed or frustrated, or?
Yeah, well, certainly I was disappointed. I think I was disappointed for the Laois guys themselves, having played against them earlier in my career. The likes of the Paddy Purcells and the Kingston, who have been there around the team for a long time. They have done unbelievably well, obviously, to win the Joe Mc Donagh in a great game against Westmeath, and they showed the lovely brand of hurling that they do play as well. Like, everyone talks about them, being physically strong and the work ethic and all that there, but I think it did show yesterday, for the limited amount of coverage that it did get, that actually these guys are very good hurlers and are able to hurl with the best of them. And Eddie Brennan's done a fantastic job in bringing up them to that level, and bringing a bit of unity to the county to get the best players back in to play for them. Now, in terms of, we discussed previously about the second tier football championship. We discussed about the tiered championship in terms of the two things that I have been banging the drum about, respect and promotion. And the one question which I had in my mind was the coverage from the Sunday game last night. There was 2.5 minutes of coverage in the whole 2.5 hours that were dedicated to the programme. And in that 2.5 minutes, the actual analysis was less than 30 seconds. And then the other issue was that they got the half-time score wrong as well. And I know there are other pressures on the programming and time limits, etc., etc. And maybe if Joe didn't speak as long, they would have got a bit more of that there. But if you're really wanting to push on in terms of Laois and promoting the hurling in that county and promoting hurling in the weaker counties on the other parts outside of the big six in Ireland, you have to give the respect and promotion to teams like Laois, and they're there on merit. The question I had was, if it was Dublin and they were playing against Tipperary yesterday, do you think they would have got 2.5 minutes of coverage? Absolutely not. So because it's Laois, why was it different for them?
But speaking from the media's point of view, like we're a newspaper, so we have to run things that we think will sell a newspaper. So RTÉ have to run things that they think is going to get enough coverage for the advertiser. They're not really too worried about, like they're supposed to be, but they can't be too worried about promoting the game. Like, I mean, they could argue that surely the Laois fans will still kids will still go on and play for Laois or want to play for Laois.
Yeah, well, I suppose there's two sides of things here when we're talking about it. And you know, when you're talking about the GAA and you're pushing the concept of money in the GAA, you know, is there not a bigger picture here? Are we not saying we want to promote Gaelic games throughout the country to make sure that people get the benefit of that there, that we have a vibrant GAA community? And, you know, is it the onus on the GAA to actually say to RTE, well, we understand that, you know, there's advertisers involved and that's fine, but there is also an onus on you to promote the game as well. And yes, there was a good Laois support there in Croke Park yesterday, but there has to be two sides of this here, promoting the game and making sure for future generations there's a vibrant GAA, whether it be Gaelic football, hurling, camogie, ladies football, and to make sure that that's pushed on for the next generation. And that will help in itself to bring in more commercialisation and bring in those sponsors as well. So both need each other, and we can't just say, well, Laois isn't the biggest draw. If Dublin have the biggest population course, then we have to show them more. And if we go down that completely commercialised model of the GAA, you know, then that erodes the core of what the GAA was founded on and what was based on, of participation and enjoying the games. And you know, where we have a vibrant GAA, especially in rural communities as well, that really helps the community and benefits the people and the wider GAA community. So when we're looking at things being driven by money and the euro or the pound, especially when it comes to GAA, I don't think that's a model that we want to be looking at, and it shouldn't be driving RTE's coverage, given that they are a national broadcaster.
I know what you're saying. So it's an ideology, really. Like, if you're taking that mindset, then that's going to push on out into the rest of the teams. I just still feel that the teams will still get support, whether the games. It wasn't long ago that we were talking about they shouldn't be putting games on TV because then people stop people from going to the actual matches. Like, the GAA should want people to get in the gate.
In terms of that, it's all about the promotion. Whether, you know, it's on TV, I don't think is you know, a stopper to people who actually want to go down. And there was, as I say, a good crowd of Laois supporters there that went to the game as well. You know, the sun was shining. Where else would you want to be supporting your team? So it's a mix of both. And myself, I listened to the game on the radio because I'd been travelling yesterday, and you know, the colourful vibrancy of the commentary, you know, was really brilliant, and I enjoy listening to the radio on occasion. So, you know, it's a collective of going to the games, making sure it's promoted, the coverage from newspapers like the Gaelic Life, to make sure that people are discussing it, they're interested in it, and it captures the imagination of the wider public. And I think Laois's journey this year has done that, but making sure it's promoted and it's available to be watched, but also that they're given the respect they deserve, and the Laois fans have the option of, you know, going to the game, which they did in numbers, and also for those that can't travel, that they're able to watch it, and it's not there behind a paywall in some other instances.
There's a concern then, if when the Tier 2 comes in next year, that we may not be seeing as much as we like to think we will. You know, the argument that Derry or whoever is going to be playing in a final, then it may not even be on the TV, and so it won't really matter.
Yeah, well, I suppose it goes back to my initial point. If it's promoted and it's given the amount of respect that it should get, and it is actually pushed forward, and it's advertised by the GAA, and it is on TV, on the radio, and the various news outlets give it the promotion it deserves, then that won't be an issue. But that has to be a conscious decision made. If we're bringing in a second tier football championship, it has to be pushed on as much as the Sam Maguire, and if it's not done like that, then it won't work. We saw it previously with the Tommy Murphy Cup. It wasn't given that respect and given the promotion that it deserved, and it fell away. But if it is done properly and they're both at a similar level of coverage, then it will work. If it's not, it won't. Again, going back to the ladies football, the junior, intermediate and senior are promoted almost the same, and they're given the respect that the players deserve and that the teams deserve and the amount of effort they're putting in deserves. So, there is a model already there that works, and why not bring that into a second tier football championship?
So do you think then that the 8 teams that are playing in the Super 8s will get an advantage down if it were to continue on as it is, and the top 8 teams or 10 will get more coverage than the rest? Will the GA grow faster in those counties?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. When I was playing at inter-county level with Armagh, they talked about being the flagship, to have some of the young guys in your club and in your county that will see you playing in Croke Park or see you in papers, and they want to actually replicate that. And, as fickle as it is, youngsters will gravitate towards teams that are winning. Like, I'm sure last year after Liverpool winning, they all wanted Liverpool jerseys or whatever else. And similarly, where there are successful teams, like even teams outside of Dublin, the young fellas are wearing the Dublin jersey as well. If your team is successful, if they're getting more coverage, then you want to be the Cahal McShane's, you want to be the Seamus O'Shea, and that's promoting the game amongst some of the younger generation. Because also, in terms of the hearts and minds, there are other sports out there as well, so you want to make sure that the young fella who from Middletown, from Coal Island, from wherever, picks up a hurl or puts on the football boots, and seeing some of their heroes that they can go to the games with, and seeing those players play at a high level on TV is going to be beneficial in terms of that. The
counter I have to this, the one I always pull out, is that kids gravitate to the club players. Like, it's the club where we draw the people into the GA, not the county game. If you go out to any club, you'll see 50, 100, 200 people. The Féile, Cool Camps is the biggest money turner for the GA because those kids are just playing. So they'll still play if they see their club teams, and the GA is more people playing at club level than has at county level. So as long as they're trying out for their clubs, it doesn't really matter who's shown on TV.
Well, I don't know if it doesn't really matter, and you're right in that the clubs are who are bringing the young players in, along with the schools as well. But if that was the case, then at the Cool Camps and all, why do they bring the county players there? So that's the other point to it. The players want to get their jerseys signed by Colin Calvin, they want to get their jerseys signed by Rian O'Neill. Those are the players that are the flagship, the shop window. Yes, they want to be the top club players, and they're talked about with respect, etc., and that sort of brings them in. And families gravitate towards the clubs, and because your brother plays, I played because my older brother played, and my younger brothers played because I played, and we all, cousins, etc., played on the same team because we all did. But having that, as I said, shop window, that flagship of the county players, does encourage them to go out and be like those players. And the club is the backbone of what we are about as an organisation. But I think where it's promoted and teams are successful, ultimately that will help bring in some of those players, which maybe are those young fellas that aren't in Cool Camps, or that families aren't associated with certain club teams. And that can't be a bad thing if we're promoting it properly and we're getting as much of the youngsters to come in to play for clubs, and with a view to maybe playing for the county if they're good enough. I think that can't be a bad thing.
Whenever you read our paper and people ask our paper and other papers who they want to be like, they'll often say county man from their own county. But 30 years ago, everybody wanted to be Pat Spillane and those fellas, because those are the guys on TV. So TV, you could take that argument that if it's on TV, then you could be inspired to play for your county. But at the weekend there was the Super 8 games. What was your takeaway from that? It looks Dublin destroyed Cork. What was that game an evidence that Cork can be got at, or that just Dublin have an extra gear that nobody else has?
For me, it's not the Super 8s anymore, it's the Super 4. The only teams that can compete, well, obviously Dublin are, number one, and rightly so, 4-in-a-row championships, play a beautiful brand of football and are really exciting to watch as well. Tyrone have reverted to the defensive, but ultimately were far too good for Roscommon, and that was down there as well, so I think Tyrone ultimately will progress. Where Mayo at, I think they scraped by Armagh, and I think they were shown up to maybe the legs are gone, and some of those players who have played a long time for the county. I know there are injuries as well, but Kerry had it all their own way as well. In terms of Donegal, similarly to the Dublin game, Meath stayed in it for a long time and were very competitive, but ultimately Donegal have that extra gear to push on, and McHugh, I think, is coming to the boil at the right time and was very good in the game. And we always have Murphy there, and they have a plethora of really exciting young players, with that key ingredient being pace to threaten the likes of the Dubs. For me, those are the 4 teams in it. The rest of them will just be making up the numbers, and I think later on in that competition there's going to be a lot of heavy drummings from some of those teams that lost this weekend.
So it's a good sign if there's 2 Ulster teams in the last, in your top 4,
yeah.
Cahal Carvill's top 4.
Yeah, you can quote that. But I think it is a good sign. But ultimately, at the start of the year, where would you have placed Donegal and Tyrone? Donegal are now back-to-back Ulster champions and have a lot of good young players coming through. I think that they the team to knock Dublin off their perch this year. It's hard to know. I don't think so personally. I think Dublin will just be too good for everybody, and they will do 5 in a row. In terms of Tyrone, the system which they set up, which we've talked about before, they have reverted maybe back to type, or where they feel secure in this more defensive side of things with McShane up top. And I think one of the, casualties of this, going back to this system, Matty Donnelly, who is, it's hard to argue with, is one of the best footballers in the country at the minute. We haven't seen him anywhere near his best this season as well. And in order for Tyrone to compete with Dublin and, to a lesser extent, Donegal, they need all of their top players playing at the top level. And I don't think the system that they play doesn't lend itself to beating the top teams. Yes, they'll turn over Roscommon even in their home patch, but when it comes to the elite level, the Dublins of this world and even the Donegals of this world, and potentially Kerry, I don't think that this system lends itself to beating those teams. It lends itself to containing them. But when you eradicate the silly fouling, and maybe a referee gives not as many soft frees, shall we say, I think Tyrone maybe will come up a wee bit short. But in saying that, in terms of their defence, like Ronan McNamee is, what he did at the weekend to Cox, who was having a brilliant season, and he just shut him down completely. They have some great defenders, and their transition is good, but I think McShane on his own up front isn't going to win an All-Ireland for them.
Cork went man-to-man with Dublin for a long time. Could be a system that Tyrone used. I know they use it in the final for a period, but it does show that that's the best way to go at.
Going man-to-man is what I want to see. If I'm paying into the likes of Croke Park or going up to Clonus, I want to see teams go man-to-man and test themselves against the best. Dublin, I think, are coming to boil at the right time as well. In the league, they've fluttered to deceive to an extent, and maybe they've put in the hard work to get to the stage where they're at. Cork went man for man and, played some really good football. It was exciting, it was open. They went 5-0 up at one point at the start of the game, and it looked like actually Dublin were could be in trouble, that they maybe had come in complacent. But in the end, their class showed, and it's that third quarter, last 10, that they actually put their best football together. Jack McCaffrey was excellent, and he's come back to his best that he was a couple of years ago when he was Player of the Year. And when you have the strength and depth that they do have, and their running game, especially in Croke Park, and that's why I wouldn't say Croke Park central to them going for this 5 in a row, but it certainly helps when you have those two games and when you know the field, and when you have those strike runners coming off the shoulder and the ability to kick scores in tight areas. I think that is a real benefit and is worth 2 or 3 points at least to Dublin every time they go out. I think Donegal and Kerry to a lesser extent have the ability to ask serious questions of Dublin, but ultimately I think with Joe Mc Donagh coming back as well, that impact off the bench and that experience that he has, I think they will be too good in the coming weeks.
Did Donegal have a better chance than Tyrone, or is it similar?
I think actually Donegal probably have the best chance of the chasing pack. Now Kerry were very impressive at the weekend, and the key thing to both teams when it comes down the stretch in those championship rounds, they have the ability to still break the tackle, and they have the ability to keep making those long bursting runs to win the ball, especially from the kick out. There was a number of occasions at the weekend where Stephen O'Brien for Kerry was making the runs out to the wing to be that link man along with Seamus O'Shea in the half forward line, and that is one of the most difficult lines to play in football these days, is providing that link between defence and attack. We talk about the transition, and they do it very, very well. There was one point in the first half where Seamus O'Shea, who I think actually is, they talk about David Clifford, but I think he is the complete footballer in that Kerry team in the forward line, and he is the guy that makes them tick. And he made a burst from the one side of the wing, and then hard ran, it turned and ran straight across the other side to pick up a ball to link it to the full forward line, and took his man on. And he was running for 400 or 500 yards at full pelt, and to take the ball at the end and kick it over the bar. And it's that hard running game that wears teams down, and the likes of Donegal have those players as well, with McFadden and Eoin Bon Gallagher and Michael Murphy, and they have the pace to do that. Ultimately, it's going to come down potentially to physicality, and if you look at the Donegal team, they have very big players, really great athletes, and are they the team to actually take it to Jim Gavin and this Dublin team? I think they have all the credentials to do it, but I think maybe this year has come a year too early for them.
There was a couple of Ulster finals at the weekend. Tyrone beat Derry in the under-20s, and Monaghan beat Tyrone in the minors. Like, the minors one's particularly interesting because it was back-to-back for Monaghan. Like, what do you think that says? Is it a good sign that team's coming through? But it also says a lot too that Tyrone are in both finals.
Yeah, it does, and the transition from under-17 especially to senior level is difficult. It's a difficult period in some of these players' lives in terms of exams, in terms of going to university, and there's a lot of, I suppose, distractions at that stage, but keeping a focus on the GAA and nurturing that talent through to senior has to be key for a small county, which is what they are, like Monaghan. And when they're seniors, I think this year, like Mayo, they have a lot of miles on the clock, and I think this Monaghan team will be in transition for a number of years until they bring through that good crop at under-17 level. In terms of Tyrone, they have the playbook as to how to turn minor Ulster and All-Ireland titles and under-21 as it was previously into serious senior teams and serious players who are able to compete at All-Ireland level. And even the current crop of senior Tyrone players have All-Ireland medals in their back pocket, which can only be a good thing when you're going up to compete against Dublin, who are one of the all-time great teams. And it'll be interesting to actually see, I know this is hypothetical, but taking Dublin out of that, it'd be very hard to pick who's going to win the All-Ireland this year in the Football Championship. But the bedrock of any successful senior team is bringing through good players from underage, and I suppose it is exciting times in Monaghan on Tyrone, and bringing those players through to compete at senior level in this day and age is going to be tough because of the physicalities of the game that are apparent now, and the development in some of those players over the next couple of years. But it will be exciting to see where they go.
I was at the game yesterday, and Mickey Hart was one of the men walking through the players afterwards, and he had a big grin on his face because he probably thought to himself, I've got a great batch of under-20 ones, and even though the minors lost, they're a great batch of players too. So it's an exciting time for Tyrone and an exciting time for us. That'll do. Thanks very much, Cahal, for chatting to us. We'll maybe see you in a fortnight's time again. We'll talk more about the Super 8s.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Ronan. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in a fortnight's time.